that's under, getting close to the end of development, but they're absolutely right. We need a park dedication bylaw to nail it out clearly on what's allowable and what's not allowable in parks. And then we're committed to doing, continue to work with you on that and the community. This group is a big part of that. Obviously the community is a big part of that as well. So it's us working together will get us to the next evolution, which is a bylaw will protect parks. So that's where we are today. And I can certainly say that I agree with everything I said here. It's not a very, I guess it's a complicated process, but it's not a very complicated document. We're going to list a group of parks that we won't do certain things in unless the community agrees. And there'll be a park use policy that dictates what can go on in all parks as far as concession stands and community, some types of events or some types of businesses. Like, I'll give you examples because everybody gets wound up when we say commercialization. But I think it's a bad word. I don't know if that's the right word. We should probably pick a different word. But a group like Local Landing, that's a facility that operates within a park. Pure Water Sports is a facility that operates within a park. The ice cream, what's the name of the ice cream place in Scotland? Tinkleberry, yes? You've been eating ice cream. Okay, Tinkleberry. Yeah, they're a commercial business in a park. So our park use policy will dictate the use or the allowable use of those types of businesses and other things that will be agreed upon by the Master Planning Committee and the subcommittee. And at the end of the day, council will adopt that policy. The same with the bylaw. So whatever that bylaw looks like, we'll start drafting it. Anthony Haddad will be leading that. I will be working with him and speaking on behalf of the city on the development of that document with your group and any other group that wants to speak to the development of that document. So we'll work as hard and long as we have to get that document to a place where the community is comfortable with it. And once that's complete, we'll then bring it to council. And then council will have an opportunity to adopt the final version. So it's as simple as that. It's been a long journey. It's not over yet, but I have to say, since we started working together, I feel that this is going to just continue the way it has been, together, not apart. And as much as your council's taking from you and a lot of other groups, they are behind what's going on now as far as that work in April that we started. That was mandated by council. I can't do much without council's approval. And I have to say that there's been a lot of lessons learned. When the agreement was terminated, I believe the mayor had sent out some messaging, and there was a couple lines in there that resonated with me and probably with you, in that he said when they did work up downtown, the downtown revitalization, it was 1.5 years of consultation. When they did the waterfront, it was 1.5 years of consultation. And when they did this parks discussion, it was nowhere near that long. It was quite a short period of time. And they recognized that, and that's why they've given us the ability to draft policy that speaks to your concerns in that area. And we'll guarantee there will always be a process before anything is proposed in an area such, in this case, as a park. So it's simple as that. It's not very complicated, but I'm happy to answer any question. And I will stay until the end of this. If you want to ask any other city question, I'll stick around after. So if you don't feel like you didn't get that, stick it to me. Yeah. So actually, that's a good point. So once the policy from the park use policy, it dictates what you can do and can't do in certain types of parks. Then there's the dedication bylaw. We'll say what the community should, what input we will have in the community before anything's done in a park. And then there's the advisory committee, which will govern those policies to ensure it's a community group that we put together that whatever comes before them, that's outlined in those policies, that will be your extra layer of security, if you want to use that term, to ensure that the public is involved in what goes on in your parks. So I don't know how to do it any other way than that. That seems pretty bomb-proof.
Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, if you would, before we go to the floor here, would you please give your interpretation of the alternate approval process versus referendum in regards to how it binds council?
Yeah.
I think that needs clarification and an understanding here in the community.
I think the alternative approval process is interesting in that when they're, I guess we use the annexation that's going on right now in the community. They're talking about bringing in some new land in the community, creating a new park. And a couple folks have come to me and said, hey, listen, we don't really like this process because we feel that everybody should have a right to say what they think. But I guess the reason why that alternative approval process was created is because if the issue is that contentious, you should be able to get X amount of the population out to disagree with it. So that process is designed only to engage with the people that don't like what's happening on whatever the issue is. So it's a pretty powerful process because it really says we don't care what the people that like it say, we want to know what the people that don't like it say. Now if X percent of people show up, and in this case I think it's like 2,700 people have to say we don't like that, and it automatically goes to referendum. And I think that's the power of the alternative approvals process, that you, as no people, if you're a no person, you can shut it down. 2,700 people is not a lot of people out of a community of 33 or 34,000 people. So I think there's value there, but the concern that was raised to me was, well, what if not enough no's show up? It'll go through. And I said, well, absolutely, but that's when you have to be engaged in the issues and pay attention, because things happen if you don't pay attention. And is this one of those examples? I think this was more of a process-based issue than it was anything else. I think people that do my job have to be ever vigilant and represent the community, and also give council good advice. When they don't get good advice, even with good intentions, they can make decisions that put us in a very bad situation when it comes to community trust, and that's where we find ourselves today. I won't be taking any questions from anybody else. I'm just kidding. Don't poke the bear.
Don't poke the bear. Okay, I'm Lee Kelsey, and one of my questions was on this alternative approval process. My concern there is, Peter, you said people have to be able to show up and come and everything. This mic is really bad, so I'll hold it down. But unfortunately, 65% of the people in this town are over 65. A lot of them don't have access to internet or whatever, or don't have the ability to get down to City Hall to get the forms and to be informed about it. So I have a concern, and this is not news to you, about the process being used. I have a concern about the process being used.
Shut off one of the mics.
In inappropriate time.
Try that mic again.
Why? I could.
There you go.
I bet you they heard me in the back. I have a concern about the process being used. So I had a concern, Jerry, when you mentioned either by referendum or alternate approval process. And I think because parks has been such a contentious issue for so long, I personally would like to see that if one of these properties, something is going to happen on one of these properties, that it be done by referendum in terms of approval of the citizens who not using the alternative process at all.
Well, I will answer that very quickly. I mean, the alternative approval process was recommended by it's a recommendation. It's not written in stone, but to have a referendum, I guess, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I just say that everywhere else in British Columbia, they successfully use these types of processes, and the communities are engaged. And with the advisory committee in place, our goal is to make it so that there is a minimum. And again, this is not saying that anything will happen in a park, but if somebody wanted to propose something and we have the process in place, we're going to make it so that there's a minimum 6 months of discussion before any consideration of any process. So I would say that has to be a mandatory, or whatever else you come up with. If you have 6 months of discussion before you even consider any kind of community input, I think it's fair to say that we can engage 33,000 people fairly effectively. Peter?
My name was mentioned.
Yeah, no problem.
We mentioned alternative approval process simply because that's what the community charter provides. that provides approval of the electorate, which can be either alternative approval process or referendum. And so there's no way we can recommend, well, we can recommend it, but it won't be legally binding, that a referendum is required every time, because the community charter provides for either. I have grave concerns about the alternative approval process, just like you do, because I think it can be seriously abused, and I think it has been abused actually with the annexation, the Wilson annexation, because I think that what needs to happen, and I've already told Joanne Plett this quite clearly, and she understood as far as I can tell, and that is that before you pull the trigger, start the clock on the alternative approval process, you have to make sure that the public not only has the information, but has had every opportunity to provide feedback and criticism, that those feedbacks and criticisms are taken into consideration by the city, revisions are made if appropriate, if they feel it's appropriate, and that a new or revised plan is put forward that addresses those questions as best as possible. Then you pull the trigger. Even still, I realize, just as you've said, that it's very difficult for so many people to get out. And I think that going forward, given the fact that our provincial legislation doesn't mandate referendum, doesn't mandate a vote by the electors for disposition of parkland, for instance, it is that what we really need to do is we need to make sure we have watchdogs, that we have groups like this that will get people, because when you require 2,700 people to vote no in the alternative approval process, most of the time, I would suspect all of the time, you won't reach that 10% threshold unless you have a group like Save Skaha Park, or like the petition that led to Save Skaha Park, unless you've got an organized group that is shepherding the opposition. And that's what needs to happen, because we are going to be operating under the community charter. We have no choice. We can't change the community charter.
I have to jump in here on this alternative approval process. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. What we're attempting to do is to make these parks subject to the legislation that requires approval of the electorate. Let's get there first. And then when there is a proposal to lease a piece of parkland, and there will be some that will be, that you won't oppose, that they'll have approval within the community. I can name some examples, but it's not to close the door that no parkland will ever be leased again, but it won't be leased if we can get there without your approval. How that approval is gained on a specific proposal will be determined at the time after a public consultation process. But let me just throw this one other thing out. The bylaw that we're suggesting, that Peter said that they're going to be developing now, and that the one that we proposed is in itself going to require approval of the electorate. The park dedication bylaw passed in 2002-42 required approval of the electorate. So to amend, change, or replace that, it requires an equal or greater process. So if we say in this room, we don't want AAPs, it could delay the approval of the park dedication bylaw that's going to protect our parks. It works two ways. There's a person called Patrick Gaynor. Is he here tonight? Yes. Patrick. He wrote a letter today, and I replied right away. It's regarding AAP. And I replied right away because I wanted to get my thoughts in order. One of the objections that could come up from council to say we're going to pass this right away in 2000 and, well, actually I should preface. We are recommending at Save Skaha Park Society Advisory Committee that this new or revised park dedication plan process be completed and adopted prior to the municipal elections in November next year.
October.
Okay, October 2018. The time is important to residents, and it's equally important to the city council to have this completed prior to the end of the current term. If it has to go to a full vote, which is commonly referred to as a referendum, council could legitimately say, we're not going to have full vote, it's gonna cost $40,000 in the middle of the year when we have one in October. If there's no opposition to something, why do we put the community through $40,000 when it's obvious that it's gonna go through? So think about that. We're not there yet, but we want to get the council to adopt this. And how they decide to have this approved by the electorate, the bylaw itself, is up to them. But the expeditious way is to do it by an alternate approval process. And if there's a very few people opposed to getting this bylaw, I don't think there's anybody in this room that is, and the majority of the people want their parks protected, then why spend $40,000 to decide the question?
Yeah, my name is Jerry Gilligan. I have not a question, but it's some information on the alternative approval process. I was involved in this, the city council wanted to borrow $2 million a number of years ago for a project, and they needed to go either to a referendum or an alternative approval process. They chose the AAP. I, along with a number of other people in town, took it upon ourselves, we didn't form a society or anything, to get a lot of signatures, and we presented them to City Hall. Once the council mayor noticed that we were getting lots of signatures, they abandoned the AAP and went and borrowed the money, took the money out of a reserve fund. That's what happened. But they can abandon this thing. Once they start it, they can stop it. This, we should all know about. They are not required to continue with the process. Once they start it, they can just abandon it, walk away from it. That's all I wanted to let you know.
Carmi Pumping Station. Carmi Pumping Station. AAP.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with anybody dropping in the middle of a AAP process. That would be very suspect to me if somebody did that. But as far as borrowing goes, the council borrows X amount of dollars for more than 5 years. They need to go to public approval. But below that, you can finance and do things within a 5-year period. I mean, I think, folks, when people are suspicious and things haven't gone smoothly or the way they should have gone, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not here to say. I'm saying that we have to have processes in place to protect your community on all topics, no matter what the issue is, and that's what we're committed to. In this instance, there's 2 people working on this policy in the city, and that's Anthony and myself, and we're working with your group and many other people to develop this policy so that if something goes wrong, you can blame me first of all, and then you can blame Anthony. Blame
Anthony first,
Maybe Anthony first, no, there's 2 people, and that's why we're keeping the group small, and that's why I'm here tonight. So you can put a face to the name if Gary or Jerry mentions me in the future, or if you see an email saying, who's that guy who said? I'm not just the guy that says stuff, I'm the guy that does stuff for a living, and my word is all I have left. My wife took everything else. I'm still married, my wife didn't take everything else. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Is this mic working?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to stay on the topic of parks.
Okay.
I was involved in 2002. My name is Ben Amos.
Yes.
And there's several people in the audience who were involved in parks, specifically Lake Okanagan Park. And we felt at that time that the parks were secure and dedicated. We find out now there's this exception clause or notwithstanding clause at the end that allows the city to dispose of the parks if they see fit. And I think the change in that bylaw will go a long way to getting the confidence of people back. I would like to take it one small step further and talk about encumbrances. Because we're not disposing of a park if we stick something in there that destroys the essence of a park. And I speak at this particular time in particular to Lake Okanagan Park, where I hear whisperings that they're considering a permanent stage in that park. Now, we understand that Lake Okanagan Park is the festival park, and so it should be. But to build a permanent stage when portable stages work perfectly adequate is wrong, because that permanent stage would essentially block the view of the Japanese garden and be a huge eyesore in that park on a permanent basis. Festivals only happen there, let's say, even 4 weeks a year. The balance of the year, that park should be left open. Now, the fact that we are destroying the view to the Japanese garden maybe won't mean much anymore if the city decides to dispose of the art gallery building and in all likelihood the Japanese garden as well. But that's a secondary issue.
Okay, well, let me just speak to those 2 points quickly, because I can help you out there.
Okay.
We're not doing anything with our gallery, it's on park land, so that would be subject to all park policy in the future. The green room concept or stage, I've heard this rumor in the community, but I haven't heard it within the city system. And I certainly haven't heard it from this council, and I can guarantee this council's not interested in doing anything in a park. That'll be in the Western, yeah. Oh, I know that. Council said that to me directly. It's like, no, this is guild policy. We'll get.
Okay, so I will trust you with all council being inspired, because I have heard those whisperings from council people.
I have said to anybody that I talk to about parks that if anybody says anything to do with parks, I will share that information with anybody. And people have come to us with all kinds of schemes, but we're closed for park business.
Thank you.
I think that goes.
That note is in the master plan draft, or subcommittee put that in.
Well, I never wrote that. You guys wrote that. What are you putting that in there for? Well, that master plan is a visionary document. Unless the community agrees to put something in a park, we're not putting it in a park. You know, that's where we're going. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Lynn Creswell. I have
Oh,
three
Lynn.
things.
Lynn Cresswell.
First of all, will there be a caveat on the parks registered in the land titles? It's
Oh, you
like,
know, covenant. Oh,
no,
a caveat?
a caveat.
Well, covenant will restrict all use. Do you want to get that, Frank, or you get it?
So will there be one?
Well, we're going to finalize the conceptual at this point, but yeah, the idea is to register these parks with land title. Yes, well, and I can't speak to specifics of something that's not written, but our intention is to make it very rigid process before you can consider anything in a park. And what that will look like is dependent on this group and everybody else that we're consulting with. There's 2 people writing that, Anthony and myself. So
Is that the Anthony that did
the Australian guy.
the Australian
Yeah.
guy that did the hockey dorm field?
No, that's not.
Yeah.
Anthony works for the city, but yeah, Lynn, I don't want to be insulting on anybody, you or anybody else. I'm going to be very respectful for you. I just expect the same return.
Perfect.
That's all I ask.
How will the neighborhood parks be protected? Somebody mentioned something that neighborhood parks were not involved in?
Your representatives mentioned, I guess, if we're going to get into the line by line of a document that doesn't exist, I'm going to have difficulty answering those questions.
Okay. They're up there for you to think about. There is nothing stopping the city of Penticton from enacting zones within the parks. That's actually been put forward by Parks and Rec Planning. Then the city of Penticton can change the zoning bylaws to allow various other things happening in the parks. Flood protection,
We're not
Are
gonna,
we
we're not gonna do
offering
that.
for
That's-
that?
I don't even know if that's possible, but we're certainly not gonna do that. It's gonna be black and white document. You can do it this way, or you can't.
So zoning is now taken right out of Parks and Rec?
There'll be certain types of parks. Again, we're going to a document, trying to give me a quote on a document that doesn't exist. But before that document goes to council.
I don't want you to
Yeah.
hold on documents that don't exist.
Yeah.
I want you to think about these questions.
Oh, okay, well, yes, absolutely. And I want you to share those things with your committee so that.
I have.
When we're creating this document.
Thanks, that's it. My 2 minutes, I'm sure, is up.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Lindsay. I appreciate the attempt to come up with a proposal for city. I've read your documents, and I have a couple of concerns that I don't think it's enough with respect to simply the leasing aspect, for example. My concern is with the content, not just the procedure involved. And if a proposal is going to be made, my concern is that fraud works in generalities. And you need specifics involved. For example, as the lady behind me just mentioned, neighborhood parks. If we've got different types of parks, what types of parks are going to be included in the definition of a park that this is going to apply to? And if we are going to talk about commercialization, what is the definition of commercialization? What limits are going to be there? For example, one of the things that I talked about with Nelson Meikle from the beginning is what is the definition, the distinction between a concession stand and a restaurant in a park? Because restaurants are prohibited in the zoning law. And yet, we have concession stands. And I could not locate a legal distinction between the two. Those need to be addressed, and as well as what is the definition of a lease, for example. And I think those aspects need to be considered in any proposal that's going to be made, so you can have specificity and take away hundreds of opinions that are going to exist on it. That's my first comment. My second comment, and one that drew a lot of attention that Nelson had put in, was the use of alcohol in parks. And I think one of the benefits of taking away commercialization, the intent and desire for commercialization, is to ban licenses for alcohol in a park. You can have permits, for example, but once you ban the licenses, you take away the ability, the financial incentive to have restaurants in the park, for example. It's simply not worth it. And finally, I think that any, excuse me, Jay.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think that any proposal needs to comply with, I'll call it vertical jurisdiction. For example, the agreement Proteau provided for marina works and improvements. In order to do that, you need federal approval because that lake falls under federal jurisdiction under the interpretation of Canada. And there's other areas of jurisdiction. You have crown lease agreements that have to be complied with. You have case law obligations for the Supreme Court of Canada to consult with the Native community, which was not meaningfully done. With respect.
I have a letter of support from the band to do marina expansion. That's been released to the public. I met with the band last Friday, still supporting the project. And in fact, the fact that we're not going to be leasing properties means that now the city will have to fund the upgrades of the marina, and that's fine. I think that's fine. It's a city facility. It needs to be upgraded. That's going to be $1.2, $1.6 million. But, sir, though all those things and more need to be considered, and we should meet offline if you'd like.
Sure.
You should be included in the discussion. In fact, anybody should be included. We should have more of these types of meetings around the specific development of that bylaw. But anything you say here today, I guarantee you, and if you don't add to this even, will be considered. This is not we're not in a rush to develop this, but we would like to get it on paper and approved as soon as possible. That doesn't mean we're going to rush it. I mean, this could be a February thing, it could be a March thing. But our goal, and we've discussed at this table here, is this is not a complicated document. We can make it complicated, or else we can make it black and white. And I think what I've heard from this group and many other people is they want it crystal clear. The charter isn't clear on it, so our bylaw needs to be clear on it. So I think that's where we're going.
Thank you. And I think to be clear, you need specificity, and that means definitions. And that's going to be critical. Thank you.
fairly salary. I have a couple points. Peter, a few minutes ago, you mentioned that should and when anything in the future takes place, for sure it'd take at least 60, or did you say 60 days?
Well,
Or
I'd
6
say-
months, you said?
I would say 6 months. Yeah,
Okay,
okay,
so-
so conversation, what do you mean the concept?
So my point is, my question about that is, let's say time passes and you're not here, and
Well, the average life is necessary to go.
excuse me, I don't want to be. Okay, please don't. I just want to, it's, because I'm not a public speaker like you are, so I'm not the judge, please. I'm trying to focus on what I'm trying to say. So, the process that you suggested, like it's going to take, we use at least 6 months. That was said by Peter Weaver in 2017. I remember him saying that. And then the person says, yeah, but Peter Weaver isn't here anymore. And we want to get this through before Christmas, or whatever. So for that to have been said, and for me to go, oh, I'm relaxed now, I feel that should anything take place, we'll have plenty of input, plenty of time to talk about it, and understand that they have to be quite a public process. I think the person who spoke just before me, when he talks about specificity, I think that's very, very important that we define what is public input, how is it made. When I went to the first meeting that I could attend of the group, of the park planning group, I felt that I wasn't entitled to speak because there were groups that were speaking, and yet I didn't really want to block what they were doing. So I think when public input needs to be, for you to have opened up and said, come to me anytime, I was very encouraged by that. It was a person saying, you come to me and talk to me anytime. That was a different stance for the city. I appreciate that. So that's my point about the 6 month comment. So second, about the term commercialization, the term that scares me is the term amenity. I can't find a clear definition of amenity. So when I look at the concession